broke it.
Is it draining?
It stopped draining. Huh?
Well, I gotta put a drain in this down lower. I did that now. Hoses that will work.